Still on Fire starts with the story of Jan's wanting to be a nun and being dismissed from the convent because she was gay. But there have been many more years of her life since then. LGBTQ part of this book is important, yet only part of it. She went on to be a world traveling peace activist, and she's been active for women and the Black community. We'll talk about social activism and what it means. She's also had a spiritual life since the convent and has come to see God and the church differently. So we'll talk about that and how it might apply to your own spiritual life. Is that a fair description, Jan? The book is not strictly for and about LGBTQ. Who is it for?
Well, it's for anybody who's interested in going from a seeker to a finder. And so it kind of follows the path of somebody who did it and shows that you don't have to be smart, you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to be rich or lucky, but you do have to be determined. So it's just one woman's journey through a long period of turmoil into a place in your life where you could feel that bliss you seem to be seeking.
Yeah. You said early in the book, and I love this, my life is a mosaic of broken glass, a work of art composed of fragments, gathered from the past and handed to the future. You're a storyteller in prose, in poetry, photographs, you're even musical. It's really not fair how multi-talented you are. But let's start with your story as a young adult. Why did you want to be a nun, especially since you already knew you were gay? And it was 1967, so gays were not exactly welcome in the Catholic Church.
Yes, so when I was 12, I realized that I was homosexual, which was very, very bad news. And so I became suicidal. And I was very, very unhappy. And my sixth grade sister, Sister Helen Charles, noted that this little kid should have so much more vitality, and why was she depressed and sad, and what was wrong with her? So she called up my mother and they started a campaign, this new thing, positive reinforcement. So the deal was they kept affirming and applauding everything that I did well, until the day came when that little sad caterpillar became a butterfly. And on that day, I decided that nuns have a secret tool, like a magic wand somewhere, and that they can save kids' lives, because that nun saved my life. And I thought at age 12, there I was, okay, here's my future. I'm going to be a nun when I grow up, because I know there's a lot of kids in trouble like me, and I'll save their lives. And so that's how it went. I had 6 years to wait. And as soon as I graduated from high school, I went into the convent. But the primary reason wasn't because I wanted to take vows of poverty, chastity, and religion. The primary reason was because I wanted to get through that boot camp out into the world, be a nun, and start saving lives.
Because you really were suicidal at 12, weren't you?
I was. I remember writing a few little suicide notes that would say, mostly for my family, but it would always start out, "Dear everyone, this isn't your fault. It's just because I was born wrong. So please don't be sad." And then I would roll it up and put it in the bathroom trash can and hope somebody would find it and talk to me, help me figure out what to do. But no one ever found it. And my dad had an electric shaver, so we didn't have a lot of razor blades around the house, and I had no idea how I was going to kill myself. But I did feel like I should die, because every message I ever received about homosexuals was a terrible, terrible message. God hates you, church hates you, family's gonna, culture does. Terrible.
You went into the convent in the late 60s. So it was the time of Vietnam, race riots, assassinations, Stonewall. Was it in some sense a way to get away from the world?
I'm sure it was. In my first draft, you always write the story where you're the hero and everyone did you wrong. And so my first draft it tells the story of how I'm going to go off and save kids' lives. But the second draft is like, oh, no, no, no. What really happened is it was like a shelter for me to run toward, as much as it was aspiring to be something great and to be of use in the world. It was also running away from, I don't have to figure out what to do about marriage. I don't have to figure out what to do about college. Everything's going to be taken care of in the convent. So it was a safe place to go in the midst of turbulent times. So both things are true then as they always are now.
Yeah. So you loved the convent. Talk about that, because I was surprised to read about some of the rules, the grand silence and keeping custody of the eyes. And you were not good at rules. As you describe it, you were smoking in the woods and you whistled in the hallways. And aside from being gay, it sounds like, how do you solve a problem like Maria? So how did that work out?
Yeah, that's kind of true. I did smoke in the woods. And I love the comment so much because I wasn't deterred by many of the rules, because I just thought they don't apply to me. Because I'm pretty shifty and I could figure out how to get around things. Grand silent. I didn't start being hugely disobedient until they started kind of making me be, because of their proclamations. But yeah, I might steal a little wine from the altar, or just be bad, like a rebel young 18-year-old is bad. If you got a personality like mine, it's like bad is good. So that was going on. But really, what also was going on is the convent. It was like boot camp, because they regulated every single minute of your day. So they created ultimately the perfect balance. I call it the formula for bliss, because each day had to have kind of equal parts of prayer and service. That's work, community, and solitude. And for me, that is the perfect formula. So now I organize my life around that formula because it works for me. I start with prayers. I make sure every day I do something of service to others, a lot of community, a lot of solitude. And I loved all the prayer life. I love the meditation. I love the richness of the spiritual reading. So I just have a personality that's monastic, I think, in a way, but because of the constraints of the novitiate, it was totally not appropriate for me.
But it was hugely important to your spiritual life and your understanding of God. Started you on a new spiritual path that you describe as going from religion to faith. And one of my favorite people in the book is Father Gravis. Can you talk about how he first challenged you and how you understand that journey from religion to faith now?
Yeah, he was our first theology instructor, professor. So he came into the convent, and we had classrooms down in the basement. So he walks in, and the first day of class, he says, okay, somebody stand up and tell me something about your relationship with this God who you're about to marry. And there's 30 of us in the room, but it was kind of a weird invitation. But one sister postulant stands up and she recites an answer out of the Baltimore Catechism, which we'd all studied and memorized for all of our grammar school years. She says something like, God the Father is the first person of the Holy Trinity. Just wrote blah, de blah, memorized stuff. And I'm sitting there going, oh yeah, that's right. Good for her. And Father Grabice looks at her and he says, "That's the best you can do?" She goes, "Yes, Father." He goes, "Sit down." And he dismissed her. He goes, "Somebody else try this." So someone else stood up, did the same thing, recited another catechetical answer about who's God. And he did the same thing to her. So now I have my first anxiety attack. I have this little tear coming down here. I hate this priest because I didn't know what the hell was going on. And he says to us all, "You should be ashamed of yourselves that all you can do is mimic. Don't you have an original thought? All you say is what you've learned from other people. Isn't there anything going on in your depths?" He goes, "You have to know." He goes, "You have to figure out, because religion is something that you inherited. It's a set of beliefs that you inherited. But your faith, your spirituality is something that you have to create based on your ultimate commitments. So you have to figure out what's your ultimate commitments." And now I'm even more freaking out because we don't know the terms ultimate commit. We're 18 years old, totally taught in a Catholic school, never how to think, always what to think. So this guy's job is to get us out of our patterns into a new mode of reflecting and creating a faith for ourselves that would be lifelong, our own utterances about our relationship with divinity based on what's true for us in our own souls, in our own bodies. And that took him a long time because we were dense. So we figured it out. I'm glad I did because, shortly thereafter, I lost the church and the convent and everything. So when I identified what's my faith, I said, I'm sticking close by Jesus here. Jesus, the man, has always been like my kind of spiritual brother in a way. I've always had a real strong resonance to that guy. And so I said, my faith and my spirituality is going to be how I show up in the world as an activist, how I am a light in the world, how I dedicate my attention and my service to people who are poor and marginalized, and how I make a stand for justice wherever I am. I knew that much at 18. That's about all I knew, but it hasn't changed. And now I'm 72.
I love Father Grabice. Okay, so you were a young lesbian surrounded by 18 to 20-year-old young women, and you got involved with Sister Marie Catherine. Because, as I understand it, because you both loved Teilhard de Chardin. That was the first.
Yeah, so she was my thought partner. She was a couple years older, a second-year novice, but we had the privilege of recreate. After every meal, after lunch and dinner, you go recreate. That means you got like a half an hour to walk around the circle, walk in the woods, whatever. And you can talk with novices if it's Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. So I knew she was reading Divine Milieu, the same book that I was reading, because she sat behind me in chapel and I saw the book there. So I went up to her and I said, "Can you help me figure out this book? Because this guy is just a brainiac Jesuit, and he's a paleontologist. So he has a scientific approach to all things divine, and so rooted in the earth as a geologist, just came into the sciences because of his love for the earth. So he's collapsing heaven and earth. That's what he's doing. He speaks of it all as a cycle of, it's either the divinization of matter or the materialization of the divine. Everything is in one of those phases or processes. So her and I started meeting every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to recreate together, because I bring a passage to her, she brings one to me, and we sit there and try and hammer it out. So it was very, very innocent. But what I did not know was they're worried about these things called particular relationships. Our sisters moving into something that might be carnal, they call it. So they thought that might be happening with us, where it wasn't happening with me at all necessarily. I mean, I loved looking forward to talking with her, but I'm not writing love letters or love notes. I'm not, feeling sexual feelings. I'm way too immature for that. But I did have a really strong affection for her. So anyway, my superior sister, Mary Matilda, called me into the office, and her superior called her into the office, and they told us both, we can't be with each other, we can't see each other. If we meet each other in the hallway, keep custody of the eyes, which means cast your eyes down at her knees and below. No talking, just can't be together ever. And that was so terrible. And that was my first rebellious act in the convent, where I wrote a little note to her. I put it in her Divine Milieu book. I said, I was just told I can't see you anymore. I'm not going for it. I'm coming up to your room at 10 o'clock tonight, and we'll discuss it. So that's what happened. I felt like I was forced into disobedience because I was being a good postulant. But when they say you can't be with your good friend anymore, they kind of force you to do it sideways. So I started going to her room almost every night, but there was never anything sexual going on. I mean, we kissed, yes, highly sensual, but it wasn't a sexual orgasmic thing. It was just a deepening of our relationship. And then we found secret places to meet during the day, because we still had our work to do. We still were talking about divine milieu and what does this mean? So it was just, when you go against the rules to that extent, that was the beginning of my demise.
And there were some other relationships, I think.
Yeah, because after she took vows and left, because she was a second year, she took vows and left and moved to a different part of the house. And then I'm a first year novice, and now I fall in love with a second year novice, who I refer to as Rosie in the book. And it's kind of the same thing. She wasn't my intellectual thought partner, but now I'm 19. Now I'm feeling like, want a little bit more touch in my life. So we had that, but we didn't do a lot of sneaking around. We just like hugging. It wasn't deep and bad and terrible, dark sexual stuff. But my superior calls me into her office one day and says, what do you have to tell me? Oh my God, that's about the worst thing anyone could ask me, because I don't know what she knows. I don't know if she knows I'm smoking in the woods. I don't know if she knows I'm stealing food out of the priest's freezer. I went through all my minor transgressions, and it wasn't satisfying her. And she finally says, have you been meeting with Rosie? And I said, yes. And she said, have you kissed her? And I said, yes, I have. And then it was like beginning of the end. Yeah. That was the year, in my first year in the bishop, when I was dismissed.
So tell about that, because it was just one evening, I think, in 1969. You were called by the director of novices into a hallway parlor, and she said,
I'm in the middle of doing kitchen charges. I'm at the washing machine, the size of a rhinoceros, putting dishes in, etc. She comes in and goes like this to me: "Follow me, sister." Chapter was going on, which is the body of women who decide who's going to come and who's going to get kicked out. But I had no worries. People would come up to me saying, "I'm still worried. Chapter's in session. They're going to send me home." And I go, "You don't have a thing to worry about. They're not going to send any of us home. They need us, for crying out loud." So anyway, she takes me down to the parlor and we sit down, and she said, "You know why you're here, don't you?" And I didn't know why I was there. I thought she might want me to move some chairs around or something. But I had this little thing. This must be kind of weird for her. So I said, "Yeah, I guess so." No, I didn't. And she says, "Chapter's decided you're not to continue your novitiate." And that was like one of those moments where I just checked out. Up in my brain, it's like, this isn't happening. This is a nightmare. Don't worry, you'll wake up. This can't be true. Because all my life, since I'm 12, I'm going to be a nun. Now they're going to send me home. I don't have a plan B. And she leaves the room to go get the dress that I entered in, because they're going to take my veil and they're going to take my little habit thing. And I just fell on the floor, started shaking and crying. And then I got worried, because what happens when she comes back in the room? My parents are going to have to be there and pick me up. So I better get it together. So everybody knows what it feels like when you try to get it together. You just lock up. And feelings are kind of numbed in a way. So I said to her, I hear my parents being ushered into the parlor next door. I say, "What am I supposed to say to them?" She says, "Just tell them you don't have a religious disposition." I said, "Okay, can I say goodbye to anyone? I'm just 2 years. This is my tribe. These are my sisters. These are my best friends. You're just going to send me home?" "Yes, you can't say goodbye, and we don't ever want you to come back here." So we go into where my parents are, open the door, and they just rush toward me going, "What happened? What happened? You were so happy here." And I was just like this numb, dumb block of ice. And I said, "I just don't have a religious disposition. We can go now." And so then Sister ushers us up through the back. They've got these secret chambers and stairways, so I don't get to see anybody. I go out the front door where my parents were parked. And it rained on the way home. It's like a 2.5 hour drive. And I just pressed my nose up against the seat and against the window in the back, and pretty much didn't say anything for the whole time, because I don't know what to say. I'm traumatized now. It was a traumatizing event. It took me 20 years to get over it.
So you're back home in Syracuse. How did you fit back into the secular world?
It was awful. 2 reasons why. One, because in 2 years' time, so much had happened. Now everyone's smoking pot. They're wearing miniskirts. The sexual revolution seemed to happen. It's like my culture was totally changed, as it would be if I had been in it, right, over 2 years, from 18 to 20. Those are pretty formative years. But I didn't know what to make of myself, because I wanted to have my prayer and meditation time. I still wanted that formula for bliss, right? But I'm living at the bedroom at the end of the hall next to my mom and dad. And I tried to tell my mom, if I'm in there, if you smell incense, don't knock on the door. I'm saying my prayers. Leave me alone. She'd go, okay. She had such good intentions, but as soon as the phone would ring, she'd open Jan, here's the phone. And it was impossible for me to maintain any kind of quiet, contemplative practices. So And every time I ran into old friends from high school, they'd laugh hilariously and say, "Ha ha, we knew you'd hate it. We're so glad you choose to come home." And I was just like, it was so important for me that people knew I did not choose to come home. I always needed to make that distinction that I never would have left that. Well, who knows what would have happened by the time I got 30 or 40. But I was just full of grief and other things too, which I had no access to. There's grief and sorrow, but there's also rage and that feeling of rejection and the worry about God rejecting me. What did God have to do with all that? So I was in a mess. I moved to California.
Yeah. And so this is what surprised me. As soon as you moved to Newport Beach, you started looking for a Catholic church that you could be a part of, and ended up playing guitar and singing at Mass. And I was really surprised that you wanted anything to do with the Catholics at that point.
Well, because it wasn't the Catholics that kicked me out, it was the nuns. And I'm still in love with nun life, right? And every day I go to the post office, I go to the mailbox, say, maybe today's the day I'll get the letter that says, "We made a terrible mistake. Please come back." That way, I'm deluded, right? I'm just living a deluded life. And I believed that they would come to their senses and ask me to come back. So I was just I went to the parish, taught 4 or 5 teens to play guitar. We did folk masses. I don't know what possessed me one day when I went to confession, and I was just reporting to the priest that I don't even think the word gay was popular then. I must have said I was homosexual, but I never thought they could see you through those screens. And I thought I was fairly anonymous, but he put these things together. And he says, "I'm not going to give you absolution unless you stop being homosexual." And I said, "Father, that's like asking me to have brown eyes. I can't stop being homosexual." And by this time, Rosie had moved out and we were living together with 3 other women in a house on the beach. And so what he's asking is impossible. It would have been, maybe it would have been possible if he said, "Just don't act on your desires." But I'm not that girl. I'm always going to act on my desires. So I go home and I say to Rosie, "This is what just happened. Confession, stop, no absolution, this and that." And she was not officially a lesbian. She just was in love with me. So she gets married later on. So anyway, we have the conversation about, should we try and not be? Should we try and not act on this? And we did stupid things like go to Camp Pendleton, try to pick up Marines, double date. It was just ridiculous. And it never worked out well. So I go back to the priest and tell him, I said, "I've tried, it's not working out. I'm just going to be me and do what occurs to me to do with my life." And then he says, "Okay, I'm not forgiving you. You can't get the sacraments, and I forbid you to be around any of the kids in this parish. No more folk masses." So that was the day when the church left me. And so, yeah, so from now on out, I'm not having any relationship with the Catholic Church, because I probably thought at that time, if I'm still going to confession, I must have still been in the throes of the programming, thinking somebody has authority, someone has spiritual authority over me. So that took some time to disentangle from and undo. It took some years for me to become my own spiritual authority, but I stopped receiving the sacraments and having anything to do with anything Catholic, because that was their rule.
So let's shift gears a little bit, because another part of your story is the making of a social activist. And as best I can tell, it started with Sister Robert Joseph, who taught you in high school before the convent. And one weekend, she went off to march in Selma with Martin Luther King. And then when she came back, nobody talked about it.
Right.
What
Came
kind of
back, we were having race riots in Syracuse, but nobody talked about it. The superior says to her, nobody in the convent said one word to her. The superior says, don't talk about this to your class. So it never became a thing, but we were all emblazoned with this new notion about how to stand up when wrong is being done, how to have your own body be a force for good. So at age 15, I know to stand up and say this is wrong when wrongdoing is occurring. But I didn't participate too much in anything until I had taken a photography class one day. We made these slideshows, and it was the last day of class, and everybody showed their slideshows, and there was music, it's automated, it's a big deal. And mine was all women and many, many lesbians. And there was nothing pornographic, but it was just all women, a song by Chris Williamson, Lean on Me, I Am Your Sister. And it was my coming out as a feminist lesbian. But it did not pay off because the professor was very mad at me. And he said, that was disgusting. I'm giving you an F. And then he goes, get out of here. And he said to the whole class, take a 10-minute break. So everybody's standing outside. And when I went outside to hang with my classmates, they just turned their back on me. And it was kind of, I felt shunned. And that's when I left that class. I never went back in the room. I strode across the campus, went to the professor that teaches human sexuality, because I was in his class the semester before, and I knew he brought in outside speakers. And I said, I want to speak to your class about being a lesbian and how much that costs. So that was the first real activist thing that I did. It was the beginning of it for me in the early 70s.
And then you took that slideshow home to show your mother and come out to her.
Oh my God, that was awful. Yeah, so I came out to her. It was at night. I took the whole kit and caboodle home. I wanted her to see how magnificent this thing was. The music, everything's perfect. Everything's lined up. It took took 3 months to get, 160 slides to dissolve into each other and be perfectly timed. It was a masterful piece of work. And I was so proud of it. And so I came out to her. My dad had already gone to bed. And she was horrified. She said, don't tell your father. I refuse to let you tell your father because he'll have a heart attack and it'll be your fault that he's dead. So that wasn't very nice to experience. But then I said, come downstairs. I have set up my slideshow. We had the finished off basement. So I said, I want you to see my slideshow. And so it's only like the length of a song, 5-6 minutes long. We're both looking at it. And then right at the very end, the phone rang upstairs. So I went upstairs to answer the phone. And while I'm on the phone, she goes upstairs to her bedroom and goes to bed. When I went back down into the basement, both of those slide trays had been turned upside down, and all the slides are all over the grungy basement floor. That was the worst thing ever. So it got transformed. There's another story right on top of this, but I don't know if it fits into your agenda.
It does fit my agenda. So how did your mother finally come to peace with this?
So she says in the early morning, Saturday, she comes in my bedroom, get up, we're going up to the lake. Up at Stony Lake is this old rustic cabin where it's a big tribal family because my mom has 13 brothers and sisters. So she goes, we're going up to the lake. She needed to get me out of the house because she thought for sure I would tell Dad and he'd die and it'd be a disaster. So it's a 2-hour drive up to the lake, and we're fighting the whole way. And my mom and me were always so tight. I don't know why we're fighting, but she goes, this is a terrible thing. You're going to break our family apart, and stop, get into another phase, get over this one. It was just all terrible, terrible. So we finally get to the lake, and there's my grandmother and her sister, Ruth. And the good news was that Ruthie says to her, let's go out in the canoe, go for a canoe ride. And then my grandmother and I sit down and play gin rummy or something. But Ruth had had the experience prior to this that her daughter married Aunt Kay's son. So this is 2 first cousins. There's 65 first cousins in my family, so it kind of makes sense. But it's illegal in many states, and it's certainly not acceptable in the Catholic Church. But because her mom, my mom, were moving through this charismatic Catholic thing, Aunt Ruth had to figure out how to reconcile that her daughter had done something unacceptable in the eyes of the church, but how does she still embrace her and still welcome her and love her? So my Aunt Ruth had been doing all that work. And so they went out for their canoe ride, paddle. And just when they're coming through the door, I'm talking to my grandma about the fact that Mom and me argued all the way up there. And so Ruth opens the door and she goes, what are you arguing about? And I said, we're arguing because she doesn't want me to be a lesbian and I am. And she's trying to talk me out of it. And so now the 5 of us are in the room together. The 4 of us are in the room together. And we're all there in the kitchen, and Aunt Ruth says to my mom, Marge, Jesus never said who to love. He just said, love them all. Love them all with everything you've got, with your whole heart and your whole soul. Love them all. And all of a sudden, I don't know how my mom heard that, but all of a sudden she freezes in place. And there's like a moment out of time. And then she starts to cry. And she says, oh my God, I can't believe I've lived this long and I'm so stupid. Because as a Catholic woman, she should have known, but she had to have Ruth tell her that Jesus doesn't exclude anybody from the family. And so she looks over at me and she says, I'm so sorry. You tell your father anything you want to tell him. And I knew she was worried still it would give him a heart attack, but she gave me permission in that kitchen to say to him what I wanted. And suddenly it became apparent to me that I didn't have to tell him. So she says he knows in his own way. And I knew he knew in his own way. And he would have hated if I came out to him. Mm. So my mom had her metamorphosis or transformation. I got freed up from my insistence on I'm going to tell my father. And kind of a miracle happened that day.
So I just want the listeners to know that we're leaving out a near-death experience, the love of her life, a trip around the world as a peace activist. And I want to ask her one more thing, but this would be a good time to put your questions in the chat box if you haven't already. So Jan, tell how you finally came to peace with the convent, because that is a beautiful story of forgiveness.
Well, I had tried I wrote to them and said in 1977, so it was like almost 10 years after, please tell me, why did you dismiss me? Because I wanted to formally hear what had been wrong with me. So Sister Joan Teresa sends me a letter that just says, sorry, your file's real short, so I'm going to tell you. It says Jan Phillips doesn't have a religious disposition because of her excessive and exclusive friendships. So that was their official reason, my excessive and exclusive friendships, which excessive, I'm always excessive, but never exclusive. So they never had me right at all. But that didn't help me. Knowing that, it was like, phooey, they got me wrong still. So I'm still agitated, still have my rage. I go to therapy. I go to therapy in California. I go to therapy. I move back and forth constantly with that whole geographic thing. Maybe if I move, I'll feel better, right? So every 2 years, I'm back and forth. Therapy in Syracuse, therapy here. So still agitated about it, angry, upset, forlorn, traumatized. And I'm living now in Syracuse with my partner, Annie, who I was in grammar school with, who I was in the convent with. She was a year ahead of me. So, and she knows my everything. So one day she calls out from the kitchen. She goes, hey, Marian Ripsky's teaching chemistry over at St. John the Baptist. Maybe you ought to talk with her. That might help. So Marian Ripsky was the provincial director at the Mother House when I was there. She was the head honcho over 400 sisters that lived there. And so I called her up and I said, this is Jan Phillips. I was dismissed in 1969. I don't know if you remember me or not, but I'm looking for you to help me make my heart whole again, because it's been broken open and I can't fix it alone. Maybe if you let me tell you the story, that something could happen. Would you be willing to do that? She says, oh yeah, sure, I'd be willing to do it. We set up a time, I go knock on the door, go in the parlor, same kind of convent parlors as they are everywhere. We sit kind of knee to knee. I say, all right, I'll tell the whole story starting with age 12 up until now, and don't interrupt me and let me cry through the whole thing. And she was great. I went just that way. I cried through the whole thing. She didn't interrupt. And at the end of it, I say, okay. And she looked at me and she said, she called me sister. She said, sister, would you forgive me for this terrible injustice that was done to you on my watch? And I said, sure. I was kind of surprised because I wasn't there seeking forgiveness. That wasn't part of my equation. So I go, sure, I forgive you. And she says, would you forgive the entire community of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet for this injustice that was done to you by us? And I said, yes, I forgive the entire community of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet for this terrible injustice that was done to me. And then all heaven broke loose. And now there's like light streaming into my being from someplace I had never gone before. And the awareness that penetrates and saturates my consciousness is this: there's nothing to forgive. I said, there's nothing to forgive. I said, I owe you my deepest gratitude for giving me the privilege of 2 years of a monastic life. And so suddenly, this heart problem, the heart gets woven back together. I'm now in the state of grace and gratitude. The whole forgiveness thing is off the table, even though I've already forgiven them. And I said, it worked. And we both just sit there going, it worked. Praise Jesus, it worked. Okay, I said, now I can go home. Thank you so much for this time. And driving home, I had the other insight, which was all these images flashed through my brain like a movie, where I got to see all the ways I got myself kicked out.
Mm.
So I caused it. I co-created it on an unconscious level, but I'm a co-creator of this, that I live out here in the secular world now. So, and that totally changed my whole approach to forgiveness. I mean, for me, the standard is nothing to forgive still.
Right.
There's never anything to forgive for me, because I'm always co-creating the events of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that.
Okay, so while I look at the questions that have come in for you, would you tell people what you're doing now? But I know that you do some workshops, and tell them about the Living Kindness Foundation.
Yes. So in I think it was 2010, I'm not sure of that year, but I get invited over to Nigeria by a Dominican sister who says, would you come and do a visionary leadership weekend for the Dominican Sisters of Nigeria? And I said, yes, I'll do that. She was in the head of NGO, which is just a nonprofit, non-governmental organization that worked with kids and people, adults, in 5 different small villages around Kaduna, Nigeria. So I said, yeah, I'll do that. I'll volunteer my time. You don't have to pay me. But in return, I want you to take me to those villages. Because I had just gotten a bulletin from Immortality during my prayer time that week that said, it's time for you to do international work. So this was like an answer to my prayer, the international, because I'd already said it's going to be in Africa, but I didn't. So this was an answer to my prayer. Okay, I'm going to Nigeria. And if I'm going to do work, I got to put my eyes on things that might be where I'm going to apply myself. So did the whole weekend. That was great. And then they get the Land Rover and we go into the villages and the roads are hardly navigable. And the last village that we visited, the kids are still standing. It's 2:30 in the afternoon. The kids are still standing outside this little ratty old, what they refer to as their schoolrooms. There's 4 rooms, dirt floors, no books, no anything, no nothing. But it's meant to be their schoolrooms. They're all lined up. They all have little uniforms on. The Land Rover pulls in. They race. There's like 80 of them. They come over. They pull me out of my seat. They drag me into one of the classrooms and they all plunk themselves on the floor and say, be our teacher. Be our teacher. And like, I didn't know what to do. I'm not a teacher. I'm not elementary material. So I go, all right, what's 2 + 2? And they go, 4. And they were so proud of themselves and so happy. And now I know, oh my God, they've been taught. So I go, okay, I'm going to make it hard for you. What's 8 + 7? 15, they say. Just so happy. And now I start crying again. And I say to them, oh my God, this is the luckiest day because I'm here and now you told me that you need a teacher and I am going to help figure out how to get one here as soon as possible. So now we're all happy. And we go back into the village, see their little huts, etc. And I say to Sister Rita that night, hey, we got to figure this out. How come there's no teachers? Well, because no nepotism, they get paid whether they show or not, so much corruption, and then they can't, if they don't have a motorcycle or a 4-wheel drive, they can't get up there in the rainy season, blah, blah, blah. So I said to her, let's build something. Let's build 2 apartments. So we have this conversation, Sister Rita and me kind of think it out. She goes, yeah, we could have like a school thing, like a computer center, 2 apartments, because men and women can't be together. So 2 apartments at the end. And then I left and I said, okay, I'll go start a foundation. And you get some quotes for how much this is going to cost. So within a week, she emails me, it's $25,000 because cheap, because there's no electricity, no plumbing. We had gone to the villagers and said, if we do this, first we went to the tribal chief, he said he would donate land. Then we talked to the villagers and they said they would build the thing, make the bricks, build the thing if we can get the money. And so I said, 25,000. Okay. I went to LegalZoom, started Living Kindness Foundation, and immediately started raising money. Sisters of Charity of Dubuque, Iowa, I filled out grants for them. Within a year or 2, the building was built because I did some good fundraising. So now there's a Living Kindness Learning Center in Nigeria. And next year I did fundraising for like solar energy. And now there's fundraising for 30 computers in there, 30 laptops. So we got that village kind of handled. So the adults and the kids are all in African software, right? Appropriate age level software for the whole range of, it was just a good deal. So then now Living Kindness still had money in the bank. And so now I'm applying, looking for projects to support, people to support who are coming up. Black women writers are primarily it, who are coming up with creative ways to address the issues of racism in this culture, because racism to me is the worst social problem that we have in this country. So that's what Living Kindness is now.
Yeah. We have questions for you. Are you ready? I love this one. So what would your 72-year-old self today say to your 12-year-old self?
Buckle up, honey. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Because I wouldn't have done it any different, because I'm in the winner's seat, right? This is the winner's seat. And so it took all that turbulence. It took the tragedies, it took the drama and the conflict for this hero's journey to get to this point where, what are we celebrating tonight? A book of mine that Unity Books wants to publish. This is the winner's seat, I'm telling you.
Okay, but so what would you say to other children who are struggling with that kind of depression because of their orientation?
Wow. That's a good question, which I just can't hypothetically answer, because the interaction the person needs to be with me so spirit can rise up and tend to what's necessary. I don't know if I'm in the company of people right now who are changing genders, trying to decide if they're going to change sex. I'm in the company of those people. And the only thing I know to do is to make it very, very clear to them that I want to hear everything. I want to hear everything, that I will be their satellite dish, and there's nothing they could do or say that would make me love them any less.
Okay. Someone else said, there's a theme of rejection throughout your life. How did you continue to have faith, and how did you know you could become your own spiritual authority?
Well, I figured out how to disentangle from the church, because I started reading Bishop John Shelby Spong to educate myself. Say, he does really good. He has a book called Rescuing the Bible from Fundamentalism. So as soon as I started reading, he's Episcopalian bishop. I start reading his work. I continue to read the mystics. And I start a spiritual practice in 1990 that it's just started out 20 minutes. And I do the same exact thing now, and all these many years later, starts out being approximately 20 minutes. It starts out with 2 candles. I have my altar, everything on it I need, have my cup of coffee, drink my coffee, go through my dreams. And then when I'm done with the coffee, okay, focus in. And sometimes it goes as long as an hour, because there's no limits. I can decide what to do with my time now, and this is my happiest part of the day. So in that period of time where I am in communion, in a dance, in a tango with divinity, I think of that. I think of God as a verb. I think of God as the ever expanding, unfolding cosmos. I don't have that notion of the guy of the Sistine Chapel. I think that Sistine Chapel should be covered over with mirrors. So I have a sense that God, who I used to call out to, is in my lungs. It's this air that I'm breathing, is as close to me as the oxygen in my blood. It's just invisible. So I have an invisible dance partner, but a commuter relationship, you might think of it as. I'm happy with it. And that kind of fuels me.
Is that mysticism? How do you define mysticism?
Well, I heard somebody once say a mystic is somebody who has an unmediated relationship with divinity. And that worked for me. Unmediated just means you don't have a priest, a rabbi, a minister. You don't have to have, but you can have. It doesn't mean you never go to church. Sometimes I have such longings for a communion line. I go to the church here that's run by our woman priest, because that's palatable to me. And then I get to experience, the sacramental nature of ritual, which Catholics do in spades. So a mystic is somebody who has the commitment, the understanding that every single day, the minimum daily requirement is for you to check in. Say, I'm here now. I'm here. Emily Dickinson has a line that says, the only news I get is bulletins all day from immortality. And that's how I think of it. You don't get your bulletins if you're not paying attention. So every day in my prayers, I put my hands out. I said, I'm a satellite dish now. I'm listening up. I'm going to sit here for a long time. Whatever happens, happens. And some days very wonderful things happen. I get my next step. Like, I know the next book I'm going to be working on, because it comes in. It comes in through the air that I'm breathing, because this is where inspiration is. Well, Holy Spirit's right here in the space. It's in my lungs. So that kind of intimacy and that kind of end of longing, end of seeking. I'm not seeking. There's nothing to seek. It's like everywhere I look, there it is. They say God's inaccessible, but I say God's unavoidable. So that's what a mystic. So if people all the time come up and say, I don't have time to meditate. And I go, oh, okay, there's not usually a lot of time to go into it, but I just make a mental note. They're not serious about their lives, or not serious about evolving their own spiritual consciousness. Because if you have an intention and an understanding that we are evolving life on earth, then you want to participate in it. And how you don't participate in it when you go to Ralph's grocery store. You participate in it when you're in your sacramental zone, no matter what your altar looks like. I always have 2 candles now, but everybody's altar is their own business. But you cannot be a mystic. It's like saying I'm in love with someone, but you never make time for a date. It's not a love affair.
Okay. Oh, you mentioned the next book. It's about not seeking, right?
Yeah, it's called right now, Stop Seeking, Start Finding. It's going to be short because it's like 5 easy steps, but people won't do them until they're really ready. And people are always reporting to me on how poorly they're doing at being true to their practice, as if I care. I don't care, because mysticism causes joyfulness. It causes bliss and rapture. And I'm not saying it's without turmoil. I mean, I had a terrible bout of anxiety this summer that caused me to have to get medicated because life was too much for me for a while. I'm not saying it solves all problems. I'm just saying I am not ungrounded ever. I pretty much feel centered. And I can't think of anything that would cause me to be wobbly, because I'm in partnership with creation itself. I am that thing. I am the particle of the wave. You can't see the wave, but when it takes the shape of a particle, you can see it. So divinity becomes manifest in matter, and I'm a material being. So we're what God looks like, if you ask me.
So you may have answered this, but the question is, when did you create your formula for bliss?
I didn't create it. I found it because I'm so happy in the convent, because I'm not obeying rules I don't like. I'm so happy because the structure causes me to be happy, because my life is balanced with equal parts of solitude, time alone, time with his sisters. Work, 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 pray, pray, pray. So for me, I get it that, oh, if I have a day that includes these 4 things, I will be happy. And I'm not saying that's everybody's formula for bliss, because somebody's formula for bliss might require a forest. You know, it might require doing a marathon, you know, trekking in the Himalayas. I don't know. But for me, it's those 4 things. And I just discovered it by looking back at my life in the convent and said, that's why I was so happy. I can reconstruct that. I'm in charge of those 4 ingredients. I'm in charge of my time. I'm never going to say, I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to do service in my community. I don't have time for solitude. Time is all we have. Every day I wake up and I have 24 hours and I decide what I'm going to do with it. Time is all I have.
Okay, so one more. What advice do you have for young folks who want to advocate for the LGBTQ community in this day and age?
Just do it. Show up. I've been going to gay pride parades. I published my first book called Born Gay. I'll tell you what, Syracuse, I'm living in Syracuse. Syracuse Stage brings in the play Rent, which deals with gay issues. They ask anybody in the community want to create an exhibit for the lobby. I said, I do. So I create this big exhibit called Born Gay get all of my baby pictures, age 2, age 5, age 8, my prom with my fake boyfriend, being in the convent. I blow them all up in my dark room, make big poster size panels, and then write a couple paragraphs about what it was like finding out I'm gay, what it was like being gay in 3rd grade, right? And what it was like having a fake boyfriend, all these things. There's like 24 panels. I have them out there in my shed right now. So that's one way of coming out. And then when the play was done, I stuck it in my closet, moved it out here to California, and put it up in a coffee shop in Hillcrest, which is our gay ghetto area, and had it up there for a month, and put a book out where people would write what their feelings are, right? So you look at, what do you love to do? And then you figure out how to do that in the service of the people, of the community, of our tribe. And so if you're an athlete, if you're a golfer, then organize a golf event. I got a good friend over in Australia. We were best friends all through high school. And I have a whole chapter called The Great Betrayal, which talks about our relationship, because I did a terrible, terrible thing to her. But she's in Australia over there and doing the same thing with a foundation that I do here with Living Kindness, only she is teaching. She's got something like 200 girls around Australia learning golf, learning the sport of golf, right? And it's not just about golf being a haughty sport for people that can afford it, but there's Aboriginal kids learning the sport, and the camaraderie in the community, in the coaching, in the mentorship. And she is making all that happen in Sydney because she likes to, she's capable, she can make magic happen. She was CEO of Time Life Warner. So people know her as a hero who makes things happen. So she called me yesterday and said, I got all these companies, all these governmental offices to give me from every state $10,000. So she's going to be in every state in Australia. Okay, so you take what's your problem? If it's issues of, because gay kids are committing suicide at higher rates than ever before. In every country around the world, gays are being beat up, abused, murdered every single day of the year. We are not safe. You figure out, what do you love to do? And then do that. So you could organize a tennis championship. When I started Living Kindness, I created an art contest for young teenage queer artists and said $500 awards for first prize, second prize, third prize, and got all these kids to claim their queerness and say, I'm a queer artist, here's my work. And I made a big deal out of it. They got their money, and it was great. But you get your ideas during your spiritual practice. That's what I'm saying. I get all my information, how to move, where to go, what to do, when I'm sitting there in silence and absorbing the Holy Spirit, breathing in God. That's ask, and you'll figure out what to do. But definitely get on my mailing list and definitely reach out to me, and I'll help you. I mean, I'm accessible. You want to be getting my bulletins from Immortality every Sunday. You want that because it's me yelling out, you can make it, you can do it, keep going.
Dan, this has been delightful. Viewers, thank you so much for joining us. There's so much more to tell about Jan and about this book. So you will want to look at her website, janphillips.com, and you will want to buy the book. And I think we're going to show you how to do that. Here you go. That's the website. Check that out as soon as you can because there's a lot more on it. She even writes music. And then the book is available from Unity right now. Jan, they came in today. The order is sitting a couple floors below me here.
Oh, good.
So you should have your boxes full of them pretty soon.
Okay.
Okay. And we will let you know about the next Unity Books Presents. This is the first ever, but we plan to have other events with other authors. So now that we have your email address, you'll be hearing from us when we do that. Jan, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And I envision nothing but success for the book.
Thank you so much for this great book launch party. And I know I see some of your names, so I know you're from all over the place. Darlene up there in Guelph, and people, Jane LaFazio just up the road here. I'm just so happy. I don't know everyone that's on, but I'm so happy to have your support and your love. And I hope I gave you good food for the soul.
Yeah.
I love you.
Thank
Thanks.
you so much. Good night from Unity Village.